Welcome to Voices Carry, a podcast series hosted by Jim Gibutowski, CEO of Marketing Messages, a global voiceover services firm, and his wife, Janet Krause, a Boston-based startup CEO and former professor of entrepreneurship at Harvard Business School. Jim and Janet interrupt their life of marital bliss to discuss how professional voiceover plays a critical role in creating a brand-affirming customer experience for businesses, from pizza shops and auto dealers to multinational corporations with global call center systems featuring languages spoken around the world.
Welcome back, Voices Carry listeners. Well, I'm going to start this episode by coming clean on an admission here. We lied during the intro. Janet, who's my co-host and lovely wife, is not joining us for this one. No, she hasn't left me. At least I don't think she's left me. She's got a business commitment, and I think you've probably figured out by now she's a lot smarter than me. She's in pretty high demand, but I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. I'm just going to blame this lie on Roxanne, who's the fine voice talent who provided the intro. But anyway, so we're going to change it up a bit today. Many of our listeners have been marketing messages users for a number of years, and they use our voices primarily for call center applications or auto attendant or messages on hold, basically telephone applications. And you do it because you want to sound professional, right? You want to appeal to your target audience. You want to imbue your brand with some energy and personality. But there's a whole other discipline out there that we call long-form narration. And our guest is going to talk a little bit more about this, but it's generally outside the realm of the telephone. It's more involved with the web, with video, with broadcast media. It's kind of the exciting stuff, a whole different brand of vodka, as I would say. And it requires a different voice talent skill set, different voice talent experience. So speaking of energy and personality, let me introduce you to Andy Field. Andy is a voice talent of considerable acclaim. He has a large social media following. In fact, he has a cartoon of himself, which I think is kind of cool, which I'd like to do for myself sometime. And I'm going to ask him about his long list of credentials. Andy and I caught up this morning. I learned a bunch of things about him. First of all, he is an expert in SEC football and an Ole Miss fan. He's a lifelong military guy, and he lives in a small town in Louisiana, the name of which I've been trying to pronounce all afternoon long. And, everyone who works with us knows we're picky about pronunciations. So, Andy, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. How are you, Jim? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. All right. Before we start, I'm going to try this. Okay. I'm going to tell you what I thought it was, and then I'm going to tell you what I think it is after I did the research. So the way that I thought it was noshitocious, which it rhymes like with supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. But then I tried it. I tried. I'm going to try it. Nakitish.
That's actually pretty close. That's close. It's Natchitoches, and it's spelled like Natchitoches, like Nacogdoches, which is the two towns are both named from the same Indian language. I know you guys up in the Northeast know all about Indian names and all the strange names of things. But yeah,
say it one more time. Sorry.
Natchitoches.
Natchitoches.
And I had a friend from Vermont drive past one time and saw the sign out on the interstate and said, "What is Natchitoches?" Which I've always said Natchitoches because that's what it looks like, but Natchitoches, if you put it has Cheeto in the middle, and that helps.
It's funny that you mentioned that because there's a website. It's one of these how to pronounce websites, and of course, as you mentioned, Massachusetts has a whole bunch of these that are like it. And there's one. It's how to pronounce Billerica, and it's this guy who's got just a shitty attitude and just the way he talks. And he's like, you got to say it like you don't care, like Billerica. Like you almost see the eye roll. It's Billerica. I'll send it to you after this. It's hilarious. So anyway, what we're going to talk about, it's pretty simple. What is voice narration? Why use a voice talent? And how to make the best use of a voice talent. So, in other words, how not to berate, abuse, and humiliate voice talents when you work with them. Don't bend, fold, or mutilate your voice talents. So
That's right.
So let's start out with how you got into the business. I mean, just tell me kind of your story around that.
Man, that is I get that question a lot. So I was a school teacher, and like a lot of school teachers, that meant that I was struggling, had a lot of side hustles. And so I was a school teacher, an Army reservist, an Uber driver, and my wife and I had a tutoring business. We had about 45 kids a week that would come through that business and 5 employees, and it was killing us. And so of course I was interested in a fourth side hustle to add on to the other 3. I had always kind of been a public speaker. The Army always made me the MC everywhere we went, and I had kind of imagined all of this stuff, but I hadn't really given it any thought. And we were in the kitchen, and I was imitating the announcer at Vaught Hemingway Stadium at Ole Miss, and I said, "That's another first down." And I thought that she would say Ole Miss, because that's what everybody says, but she didn't. She said, "Oh my gosh, you should be an announcer guy." And I said, "Well, yeah, that's."
She should have said "Roll Tide."
No,
maybe not.
No, my gosh. And so that was 2013. So of course I went and Googled it. How do you become a announcer guy? I didn't even know what to call it, and found out you could do this stuff from the internet nowadays. That wasn't true 40 years ago. You had to be in one of the big cities, but it's doable with the internet from anywhere. So I got into it and got started, and I just was consumed with it. And it took me about 4 years, and I went full time with it. I quit slowly but surely. All those jobs disappeared, and I was a teacher, and teaching was getting in the way of my voiceover, as opposed to the other way around. And I thought, what could I do with an extra 40 hours a week? So I fired my school principal, told her she was done, and I struck out on my own, and I'm retiring from the Army Reserve now. So I'm about to be down to 0 jobs finally. Just one job.
Got it. Well, thank you for your service, for sure. You said you really like what you're doing. What is it that you love about it?
Well, one, I love owning my own schedule for the most part. I mean, there are some hard times, but when you're a teacher, you go to the bathroom at certain times. You go to lunch there's a 20-minute lunch break with the kids. Good luck calling the bank. Taking care of some business. It was absolutely miserable. So I love owning my time and being able to go eat lunch with my wife if I want to. They say entrepreneurs, like voice actors, are the only people that'll work 80 hours a week, so they don't have to work 40. And it's true, but it's my 80 hours. If I want to do it all on Saturday or at 3 a.m, then I can do that. So I like owning it, and I like that it's different. Man, I can do some long form narration, and then I'm doing a commercial, and then I'm doing a video game, and it's just. I love the variety in it and not doing the same old thing every minute.
I got to ask you, because this is a question I got. In fact, we did our first episode on this particular topic. What is it that people ask you when you tell them you're a voice talent? What's their first reaction?
The number one question they always ask, you've already asked, is how'd you get into that? It's like it's instantly springs into their mind. And then their second question usually is, what have I heard you in? And the thing is, not much, really. I'm in the Five Nights at Freddy's video game, so your kids have probably heard me in that.
Okay.
And the fifth game that I'm in just came out 3 days ago, 2 or 3 days ago.
Is this like Grand Theft Auto, where people are shooting each other up? And
no, it's a horror game. Imagine a haunted Chuck E. Cheese with the animatronic animals trying to kill you. And I'm the friendly guide voice through this thing. I'm the computer that kind of gives you directions and welcomes you to the game.
So there's mayhem happening everywhere, people screaming, and Andy comes in says, right.
Welcome to the first day of your exciting new career. That's the first line of, and where you find out that you're the night maintenance person to have to maintain these haunted animatronic animals that want to kill you. Anyway, that's my big thing. But commercials here and there. I've got a TurboTax commercial coming out. Hopefully, I hope I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. By the time this comes out, I probably will be able to.
Right. You will have been sued and jailed at that point.
Yeah.
So as far as as I mentioned in the intro, the world that we marketing messages have lived in mostly, although we've done a number of narration jobs as well. This whole idea of long form narration. What are some of the kind of different subdisciplines or categories that you run into when you're doing this kind of voice work versus, a telco app like a call center or IVR app?
I think the baby of long form narration is probably the corporate narration, those 3 to 5 minute long videos that are a little too long to be a commercial, but a little too short to be anything else. And they're too long you can't afford to put them on TV or the radio. So they usually live on the website because they're 4 or 5 minutes, just everything that anybody would ever want to know about your company in 4 or 5 minutes. Those are the babies. And then you get into the longer e-learning courses where, it may be broken up by slides, but you're the narrator. It's some long form. You're doing a lot. And that's probably my biggest client is I narrate for Quimby, which is a law school study guide. They're creating a massive library of case law and constitutional law and immigration law. And so probably daily I do 6 or 7, 5 or 6 minute long narrations for them. And I just usually do them back to back. So it's grueling. And then some companies do video sales letters. They'll have like a 50 to 70 minute long pitch of just the voiceover going and their slides. It's usually one of those high pressure things where like there's something you really want, but they're not going to give it to you till the end of this 40-minute pitch, and you can't fast forward and you can't pause it and you can't click away.
Well, wait a minute. What's the application? So you're
video sales letter.
A video sales letter. So these are going out via email, or how does that work?
When I've seen them, it's been like, okay, you want this free gift worth, $29.95. And so you click, but then you have to watch this video. And it's usually it's pretty cheap, and it's like slides. It's like text on the screen, but there's a narrator going. And that narrator, you've got to keep that audience from clicking away. Don't click away yet, because don't forget there's this $29.95 thing at the end. But I got to tell you the story of my mom and how she had leukemia and blah, 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 and you go through this whole thing. And finally, but also, with this free $29.95 thing, we also have these 3 other, it's just really long. I mean, those are 40, 50, 60 minutes sometimes, and they hurt.
How do you keep somebody's attention? How do you keep them from clicking away? I mean, I'm just curious, anything around the voice, the way you voice it?
They like those a little faster and a little more energetic than like a normal e-learning course would be or something like that. Those guys are salespeople. And so they're like, listen, the human brain can comprehend what you're saying. Just keep going. Plus, they're reading it as they're listening to you. So I think in that genre, we go fast. Whereas e-learning, sometimes slower, especially if we believe our e-learning students speak a different language or English is their second or third language. Or even if that's just part of the audience. Sometimes we want our e-learning to be a little slower so that we can guide them through the course. And then other e-learning courses also want to go fast. So it's all interesting.
Do you have a favorite kind of long form narration or kind of job, if you will?
Well, my favorite is the kind that keeps coming back. But
it's like, I don't know if you're a football fan. It's like they asked Tom Brady who your favorite receiver is. It's whoever's open.
Right. Whoever's consistently catches it. I do like these legal things. I've narrated thousands and thousands of videos for Quimby now, and so I really dig legal stuff now. I like medical stuff, but it's slow and grueling a lot of times, because even if you're good at medical pronunciations, you still have to stop a lot to look things up.
Yeah,
I love educational stuff. I don't get enough of that. I used to be a math teacher, so I wish somebody would send me some math e-learning, where we could talk about integrals and derivatives and all that kind of stuff would be fun. But in general, it's not the most fun genre of voiceover. When you get a good commercial or video game script, those are fun, but long form is grueling. But anytime I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to narrate another one of these, I just say, well, it sure beats the heck out of working. I'm sure not going to go back and teach middle schoolers again. So I love middle schoolers, by the way. That's no hit on anybody's kids there.
We do have the conversation quite a bit at Marketing Messages when we talk to, either prospects or folks within companies we've been working with for years, different people in the company. And there's always the question of, I've got this thing in front of me. I've got somebody, a junior person in my department who needs something to do. I can just have them voice it. And so that leads me to the question, when should a company use a professional voice talent versus using an employee, and why?
I think you're fine using an employee for voiceover applications as long as you don't care about the result.
Okay.
Anytime you don't care, I mean, if you're just checking a block, somebody said you had to make a video, by gosh, and Bob from accounting, just let him voice it. As long as you don't care what the video does or if anybody even pays attention to it.
If it sucks, then do
Yeah.
it internally, right? Okay,
Right, right. Well, and in the old days in the Army, for example, the Army's got tons of these mandatory training things. And, we would get like suicide prevention training back in the 90s. And it was the worst stuff ever. I mean, it made you want to commit suicide after you got done watching it. But as it's become important and we've diverted more priority to it, funding and effort, it's some world-class training. It's really, 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 really good stuff. And part of that has to do with the actors, or really, by that point, they've gone to in-person delivery and training facilitators to come do it in person. But resources follow priorities, right? So if whatever you're designing isn't a priority, then you don't spend any money on the voiceover, and that's just how the world works. But
what do you find happens when people try to do this on their own?
Well, I had a client the other day and we were negotiating and all that, and we couldn't come to an agreement. And she said, I'm just going to have to narrate all of this. And she had hours worth of narration to do. And it wasn't her job. She had other, and I said, I'm looking forward to you contacting me back and telling me how this went. Cause it's going to be painful. It's difficult, right? So imagine just reading a book out loud. And stopping every time you make a mistake and going back and picking up where you left off and re-recording that. Do 15 pages like that and then just say, wow, that was painful. But a lot of times somebody who's not experienced in it doesn't have the vocal stamina. It's just like being a distance runner. There's you can go 5, 6, 7 minutes and then you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I've got 30 more minutes to go. This is hard. And then, of course, you don't have the experience. Just because you have a pleasant voice doesn't necessarily mean there's some acting involved in this, right? It's not just talking. You have to, you kind of have to make it sound like you mean what you're saying instead of welcome to module 4.2 of preventing sexual harassment. In this module, you will learn to, blah, 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 and so what comes with the experience is a little bit of knowing how to put a little energy into things, but also you can't rehearse long form. You can't have a 60-minute script and go over it 2 or 3 times. You've kind of got to go as you go. And so a lot of that comes with experience of being able to see the next sentence as it's coming and say, oh, this is going to get a little more serious. So let's drop the tone as we go while you're saying the current sentence. Or you say, oh, this looks like it's going to be a rug pull moment where we're saying something in a normal tone of voice, but then we record scratch it, and we say, just another.
It's funny because, I think about when I read bedtime stories or soon in a couple of days, the night before Christmas, right? And I actually did a little bit of acting when I was in high school and college. While I'm giving the story, I oftentimes just think about being a voice talent. Like, why wouldn't you think of that if you run a voice talent company? And you begin to realize, transitioning from word to word and changing your inflection and just not stumbling over words it's harder than it looks.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example, and it's a newbie mistake. Well, it's not even a newbie mistake. The 3 terrible local DJs in my area, I hear this at least 2-3 times a day in commercials, and it's where you have a comma separated list. For example, I might say, I went to the store and I bought apples, bananas, and a coconut, right? But what happens is a lot of times the narrator will be surprised by the list, right? And they get to that comment and they say, I went to the store and I bought apples, bananas, and a coconut, right? It's like you ended the sentence no, you have to stop and go back and redo the sentence now. You can't put a period after apple and then pick up with the rest of the list. And if you don't see that list ahead of time, that happens a lot.
Right.
And then how do we want that list delivered? Is it apples, bananas, and a coconut? Or is it apples, bananas, coconut? That's how you do in a shampoo commercial. Each one has an exclamation point after it. But.
I gotcha. Let's switch gears a little bit. So one of the things that at Marketing Messages we try to tout to our customers is a concept called voice marketing. And in a nutshell, it's simply aligning voices, both delivery and the voice characteristics with the company's branding and their customer profile. And that you have to have a conscious thinking for keeping some level of consistency across the different platforms or different vehicles through which you might hear a voice talent. And so we think that it's important that there's a conscious discussion in advance, both in terms of selecting the voice talent, but also letting the voice talent know information that might be helpful so that they can achieve that alignment. I don't know if there's a specific question in there. Is that, do you agree that that's a worthwhile thing, and why? Or just
Absolutely.
tell me I'm all wet. Either way.
No. You're spot on, and that's true in the commercial world, and really, anybody who's hiring voice talent is somewhat in the commercial world, right? Because you're in a business more often than not. And one, it's important to pick the right voice. You want Sam Elliott if you're selling Dodge trucks, right? He's got to be manly. You want somebody that smells like diesel fumes, sawdust, and gunpowder to sell your pickup trucks, right? And you would think that would be the voice for Home Depot, but next time you hear a Home Depot commercial, listen carefully. He's not really masculine stereotypically whatsoever. He's almost effeminate, because Home Depot isn't Construction Depot. It's Home Depot, right? We want people to come in and do home projects. We want that 30-year-old millennial who doesn't even own a hammer to come to Home Depot, right? So he's a little bit up here. He's a little higher, and he's almost got a lisp in his voice. It's Josh Wilson. He's an on-camera actor also. But you would have thought Home Depot would have been, I like tools, lumber and tools. No, that's a truck commercial, right? But, and obviously you don't want a 50-year-old man if you have a product that is geared towards women, right? Like, you're not going to hear my voice on a pregnancy test commercial.
I certainly hope not.
Oh, you might, if that's what if they're marketing towards, is the guy going to buy the pregnancy test.
True.
But, old voice, young voice. And a single actor can vary a little bit, but it always helps to just pick the right one in the first place, right? I kind of go higher and faster when I'm talking to millennials, and I kind of go slower when we're talking, a little breathier when we talk to 70-year-olds, right? If I'm selling orthopedic shoes. So it's, but then when you do pick the voice talent, you've got to kind of give them enough direction to say, here's what our client is like, here's what we're aiming for, and even where are we going with this? Because just the words on the page don't always give the story.
So what specific information do you find the most helpful in terms of just preparing yourself for this?
Maybe the best way to say it would be, give me 3 adjectives that describe how you want the listener to feel when they've listened to this, right? And that steers it, right? Because you can have a delivery with a smile, right? Our hospital is the best hospital in the area, unless we're saying 75,000 people died from COVID last year, right? We don't say 75,000 people died in this region, and we're good at COVID. No, right? It's the other way. It's our hospital is providing this service. So are we professional? Are we grave? Do we have some gravitas in this? Is this cheerful? Is this upbeat? Is this kind of quirky and funky? Is this an artsy kind of thing where we're kind of appealing to blue-haired 28-year-olds? Or is this a standard we're trying to sell to the quintessential American family that drives a white hybrid SUV to soccer practice, right? Is it everything else or somewhere in between?
I think about when I first started, and I kind of intuitively knew that you had to get the right voice talent, and you just kind of assume if you're new at something that, it'll all turn out right. So we had one of our clients go through our roster of voice talents and pick a particular voice talent. And it was a tax accounting firm, and so you just kind of make some assumptions of what a tax accounting firm would want. And we did the recordings, and it sounded fine, went through the editing process, sounded fine. And the customer came back and told us that this guy is just way too formal and way too staid. I'm like, at that point, it's like, oh, dude, we just did the recording. Like, why are you telling me this now? And then it just dawned on me that, geez, maybe it makes sense to ask the question in advance what the person, it perfectly lines up with your Home Depot story. You just can't make presumptions about things. So,
right.
So now we always, always ask, and have a little sheet that people fill out. Did you think of this? Did you think of that? But
and somebody like an accounting firm often has the direction that says, we need somebody who can take a very dry subject and make it not quite so dry and a little more energetic, especially if you're sharing accounting with non-accountants, right?
Right.
If it's an accounting course for accountants, it can be dry all day long because they're going to suffer through it.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's right. And you talked about kind of the range of a voice talent, which kind of gets to the question of the ways that you can vary delivery, right? Like, what are the variables or the dimensions that you can kind of change within a certain range, but like, what are the levers you can pull?
Yeah, well, of course, there's pace, so a faster pace typically indicates a little more energy.
Yeah.
Slower pace is we're talking about difficult things that are a little harder to understand, or we need a little more time to digest, or maybe it's an older audience or a bilingual audience. The formality, you said it, sometimes you do want that stuffy voice. Sometimes you do want, welcome to module 2.1 of preventing sexual harassment. That's what you want to sound like.
The radio guy.
Right. But sometimes you want it casual. You're like, okay, look, guys, we know you got to do some sexual harassment training. So here's module 2.1. We're going to talk about quid pro quo sexual harassment. Right. And it's almost like you're just being talked to by the voiceover, you hope. And that's probably the most difficult voiceover, is the conversational one. Because although we can knock out conversation all day long, one, people don't write conversational well. And two, even if they do, it's hard to read conversational well.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny. We had a whole, the last episode that we had was around voice user design. It was more kind of oriented towards call center, but I can imagine the same thing happens in long form narration where, you can't ask a voice talent, no matter how good they are, you can't give them a formal script with formal words and expect it to be conversational. So
right.
We spent a lot of time just, simply, could not, should be, couldn't, right? Just contractions.
Right. And a lot of times your voice actor can take the initiative and I'll insert contractions and things like that. But sometimes you'll have a script that seems pretty formal, and about 10 or 20 sentences in, there'll be a sentence that's really casual and you're like, oh my gosh, this whole thing should have been in that style. Right.
Boy.
It's like, what about this? No way. And you're just like, oh, we're talking like that. Oh, this is okay. I'm conversational now, but yeah. But you'll get a direction that says, this should be conversational, like you're standing around the barbecue pit with a beer. And then sentence 3 begins with the word introducing, right? And you're like, right? So you're like, blah, 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 blah.
Like...
Introducing a new product. And nobody says it, right? So,
right,
so
exactly.
And that kind of lends itself to, just like somebody might think they could do voiceover, somebody might think that they write good copy. That's why we hire copywriters too, right? Sometimes, Nike doesn't just take Bob from accounting and say, Bob, write us a script, right? Nike hires the best script writers that there are in the world.
Right. It's something I thought of that I hadn't thought to ask. Male voice talents versus female voice talents. Like, what are the considerations there?
Well, I'm a male, so I speak from that a lot. So one thing I have noticed in the world, okay, if you're ever in the airport, there is going to be a female doing the announcements, and there's going to be a male during warnings, right? We tend to listen and we kind of lean forward and want to know what females have to say. So when they're saying, don't leave your baggage unattended, right? Or, welcome to the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, blah, blah, blah. But it's the man that says, stand clear of the closing doors, right? Because you don't, if there's safety involved.
I don't know. My wife is not on this call. You might change your mind if you hear her.
Well, and then, of course, there's your normal stereotypes, right? There's the, stereotypically men are interested in the way things work and the way things come apart and go back together and the mechanics of things. And women stereotypically are more nurturing. That's why men aren't particularly interested in nursing in general. I was a nursing major, but we have all these fields that we worry about. There's too many men here and there's too many women here. Well, women don't care in general about how toilets work. And so they tend not to become plumbers, right? And they tend not to become electricians. It's not that the fields are hostile to them. It's just that our brains work differently. Of course they do, right? There's no argument there. In general, there's exceptions to everything.
Right.
There's exceptions to everything. But we notice them because they're exceptional, right? We're like, oh, wow, a male nurse, or oh, wow, a male kindergarten teacher. Oh, wow, a female electrician. That's unusual. There's a couple of great female audio engineers in the voiceover industry, but we've noticed them because it's unusual. So I think that kind of lends itself too. And I think companies do that. If you're an engineering company and you're pitching this machine that's doing this certain thing, I think a male voice is what you want for that. Mainly, and also because a lot of your buyers are male. Whereas if it's, if it's a healthcare thing or I mean, I try not to be too stereotypical. I don't know. One of your listeners is going to find me and go, I can't believe you. I'm sorry, guys. I'm doing my best.
That's right. Another, I guess the last topic is, what advice would you give to clients to get the best out of a voice talent?
So the more detail you can give, the better. Your audience, your purpose, your product, whatever it is, why are you doing this? Setting, if the voice actor is playing a character, where are they? Who are they? What kind of person are they? Where are they? All of that. And I would say for long form, you want a sample up front, a sizable sample, let's say 30 a minute, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want, like you said before, somebody to do a 20-minute narration and then they say, it was a little too stuffy. It was a little too, I didn't like the style there. And that kind of leads into this other thing too. The voiceover typically is last in most productions.
Yep.
And there's nothing worse than recording a 20-minute narration and then having 5 little onesies and twosies where they come and say, hey, we changed this sentence, and hey, we did this, and hey, we changed that. So, well, as a freelancer, not working for marketing messages, you would be charged. I would charge you for another recording session, right? And it would be as much as the first one. I have a minimum session fee, and then the length. So that minimum session fee is not what you were hoping to pay for one sentence,
right?
And so typically, for example, if I record a commercial script with a client, it's that commercial may be on TV that day. I mean, the voiceover is almost last. Usually. So yeah, that's probably it. Is do it last, do a lot of details, and don't be scared to be involved. If you want to do a live session with the voice talent, do it. For one, we love it. I'm an extrovert and I have to sit in a padded room and talk to myself all day long. So anytime I get a live session with a client, I'm excited. But two, you really get to, you can't do a live session for a 30-minute narration, but you can sure get in there for the first minute or two and say, okay, and this is how we want it to feel. Okay, that sounds great, Andy. We're going to log out now and let you finish this up. And we need the file by tomorrow or this evening or whenever, and turn me loose. But don't be scared to, I know what I'm doing in voiceover, but that doesn't mean I know what you
can't read
want.
minds.
Right.
Yeah, can't read minds. Is there anything that customers do that actually just drive you absolutely crazy?
A couple of things. One is the coming back later to say we changed this, and it's not coming back later because the customer is right, and I want to make sure everybody has a good experience. But it's coming back later and hoping that that's free, right?
Yeah, right.
And I'm in the middle of a ton of other things. I've got a business I'm running here, or whatever, and or maybe it's one of those times where I'm 2 hours away because I own my own time, and you say, hey, we need this in the next 5 minutes because we screwed up the sentence and we needed to say this. Yeah. Which is fine. Now, if I made the mistake, I'm going to scramble to the microphone and get it fixed as fast as I can for you. Sometimes producers, people who are making something are so married to their product and they're so wrapped up in it that they get just minute details. And it's to the point where they say, I think, would you go back and say the word apple? And instead of saying apple, would you say apple? And I was just like, man, that is this is a 20-minute narration. How many of those are you going to do? But man, people they're down to the nitty gritty on the sentences and not just allowing the trained voice actor who knows what you meant in the sentence. Sometimes it's not exactly the way you would have said it, but it still has the same meaning and it kind of emphasizes the things the right way. On the other hand, don't be scared to say, hey, in that sentence, you emphasized the word good, but we're not really emphasizing that. What we're really talking about is the word narration, right? So let's go back and emphasize that as opposed to, because we'll make mistakes, man, in a 30-minute script. My gosh, there may be a mistake. You say, hey, in that sentence, you didn't realize you were comparing it to that thing in the previous sentence, and it doesn't sound like you were. Okay.
They have business context that, perhaps they didn't think to tell you in advance, and all of a sudden it's like they listen to it and go, oh yeah, that's not what we're trying to do. So
yeah, pronunciations is another good example. Yes. I did an engineering thing the other day and I said agile, and they could you stop? It's agile. I was like, oh, okay. It's some sort of system, project management system was agile.
Funny you should mention that because the last episode we did was about agile and call flow development. Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah. So we like to wrap up with the future.
Oh.
And what you see in the future. What are the things that are most interesting? What are the most interesting and forward-looking applications for long-form narration?
And it's interesting. It's we talk about this a lot in the voiceover community, but technology is, as you know, progressing rapidly, exponentially. For one, it's what allows voice actors to work from anywhere now, as opposed to having a little small cadre of them in Los Angeles and New York and Chicago. But as it progresses, it makes it more and more and more and more accessible. So what we see is the industry getting watered down. And so not only do we see a lot of cheap voice talent, but we see a lot of voice talent that sound cheap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think our culture is becoming accustomed to bad voiceovers, right? And we're okay with it, to the point where, okay, maybe an AI voice doesn't sound like a human, and we're okay with it, right? We're just like, yeah, that's fine. And so I think that's the thing that's most concerning is not that things are out there cheapening the industry, because there's always going to be a need for a Mercedes, right? As opposed to a Pinto, right?
Right.
If you want a Pinto, you're not going to buy a Mercedes. So there's always going to be work for me, right? I'm a Mercedes.
Right.
I like to say that I am. Anyway, I like to feel that I am. That's in my dreams. I'm a Mercedes, right? But there's less and less and less and less of that other work. And so you just see people coming into this industry left and right, and with all these bright-eyed and bushy tails with these hopes and dreams. And it's hard to break into. You got to put time and money into it. And then you find out nobody's hiring, or people are hiring $5 voice talent.
Right.
And that does exist. $5 voice talent does exist.
Yep.
It's like a $500 car. It exists.
Yeah, I think our last guest just talked about, you buy or construct this beautiful home, and you don't put the right coat of paint on it, or you put a cheap paint on it, and all of a sudden the thing is flaking and chipping, or it just looks horrible in the sunshine. And it's in the world that we work with quite a bit, in the telco world, it's you put together a $500,000 system with a great call flow, and a lot of thought goes into it, and then all of a sudden you hire Joe in IT, and well, there you go, you get what you get. But, all right, well, Andy, it's been fascinating. It's been a fun day from our first talk through the end here. Any other thoughts in terms of anything we might have missed at all, or I think we covered it?
No. I'll tell you, the future of long form is bright. It's happening. E-learning was on track to be a $230 billion industry by 2023. And with COVID, that's already changed. It's already on its way to being a $1 trillion industry by 2030. Which drones are on track to be a $90 billion industry, to put that in perspective. Jeez. So not even $100 billion, and e-learning is already on track to be $1 trillion. Everybody wants it, everybody needs it, and it's the wave of the present. Everybody's working from home, so the digital production is just it's exploding. It's where it is. So it's exciting, and it's it's one of my favorite forms of voiceover. It keeps me busy during the day. Good.
Well, excellent, Andy. I appreciate your time, and good luck to you getting more of that stuff, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks, Jim. It's good talking to you. Hope to see you soon.